In the wake of the tragic Watts family murders, the survivors, determined to honor the memory of their loved ones, embarked on a mission to shed light on the often hidden world of domestic violence. They delved into the complexities of healthy relationships and the subtle warning signs of abuse, understanding that education was the first step towards prevention. With a heart heavy with loss but a resolve unyielding, they launched a mobile app that served as a beacon of hope for survivors, providing them with vital resources and support at their fingertips. The app offered a wealth of information, from hotlines and shelters to counseling services and legal aid, all designed to empower those who had the courage to seek help. But the founders knew that the journey did not end with the creation of the app. They were determined to offer a more personal touch, so they initiated a series of retreats for survivors. These retreats were not just gatherings but sanctuaries, safe spaces where individuals could heal from the trauma of abuse and reconnect with their inner selves. They were guided by professionals who understood the nuances of domestic violence and the emotional turmoil it wrought, creating an environment where survivors could share their stories, find solace, and build a community of support. As the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation, they remained steadfast in their mission, their resolve never faltering. They understood that their journey was a marathon, not a sprint, and that the road ahead was fraught with challenges. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the unwavering support of their community, which rallied around them, offering their time, talents, and resources. The volunteers, many of whom had personal experiences with abuse, were a testament to the power of empathy and the strength of human connection. They were the backbone of the foundation, tirelessly working to ensure that every survivor knew they were not alone in their struggle. The hope that fueled their mission was a beacon, illuminating the path forward and reminding them that every life was worth saving, every story worth telling. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had transcended its original purpose. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. The foundation's reach extended far beyond the confines of their community, touching lives across the nation and even around the world. Through their efforts, they had sparked conversations, raised awareness, and inspired action. They had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fact that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there was always a chance for redemption and a future worth fighting for. Yet, as the foundation continued to grow and evolve, the founders remained acutely aware that the fight against domestic violence was far from over. There were still countless lives at risk, still countless stories that needed to be heard. They knew that their work was a never-ending endeavor, that the battles would be numerous and the challenges great. But they also knew that they had the power to make a difference, that they had the ability to change lives, one survivor at a time. And so they pressed on, their mission unwavering, their hope undiminished. They continued to offer resources, to host retreats, to provide support, and to advocate for change. They reminded survivors that they were not alone, that there was a foundation to fight for them, to stand by them, and to ensure that their voices were heard. They were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a light to guide the way. As the foundation continued to thrive, it became clear that the impact of their work was profound. Survivors found strength in the knowledge that they were part of a larger community, that they were not defined by their past but could shape their future. The foundation had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of the possibility of healing and transformation. And as long as there was hope, as long as there were survivors, there would be a Watts Family Memorial Foundation, ready to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the tranquil retreat center, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. They had come a long way since the tragic loss of their loved ones at the hands of Christopher Lee Watts, a man who had masqueraded as a loving husband and father before revealing his true, monstrous nature. The foundation had grown from a seed of grief into a sprawling network of support, offering a lifeline to countless survivors of domestic abuse. They had launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. The app offered everything from emergency contacts to counseling services, and it had become an invaluable tool for those seeking help. But the founders knew that an app alone was not enough. They needed to offer a tangible presence, a safe space where survivors could gather, share their stories, and find strength in one another. So, they started a series of retreats, creating a haven where survivors could heal and reconnect with themselves. The retreats were meticulously planned, each one designed to cater to the unique needs of those in attendance. There were workshops on self-care, healing circles, and even opportunities for survivors to learn new skills that could help them rebuild their lives. The retreat center became a sanctuary, a place where the weight of the world seemed to lift, and survivors could finally breathe easy. As the founders worked tirelessly to expand their reach, they remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. They had seen firsthand the devastating effects of domestic violence, and they were determined to prevent such tragedies from happening again. They had learned the warning signs of abuse, and they were committed to educating others so that they could recognize and respond to these signs before it was too late. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The foundation had become more than just a place to seek help. It had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fact that even in the face of unimaginable pain, there was a way forward. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. The founders often reflected on the words of their late daughter, Grace, who had inspired them to take action. "We can't change what happened to us," she had said, "but we can change what happens to others." And so, they had set out to do just that, to ensure that no one else would have to suffer the same fate as their beloved daughter and her family. The foundation's work had gained national attention, and they had been invited to speak at conferences and events across the country. They had met with policymakers, advocating for stronger laws and better support systems for survivors. They had even helped to pass legislation that would make it easier for victims to seek justice and receive the help they needed. But despite the accolades and the recognition, the founders never lost sight of their ultimate goal. They knew that their work was just beginning, that there was still much to be done. They had to continue to educate, to advocate, to support, and to love. And they had to do it all with the same passion and dedication that had driven them from the very beginning. As they stood together, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation felt a deep sense of purpose. They knew that their journey was long and arduous, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the countless survivors who had found hope and healing through their efforts. And with that knowledge, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they were fighting for a cause that was greater than themselves. The retreat center was a testament to their dedication, a place where the pain of the past was honored and the promise of a brighter future was celebrated. And as the founders looked out over the tranquil landscape, they knew that they had made a difference, that they were making a difference, and that they would continue to make a difference until the last survivor had found the strength to break free from the chains of abuse. And so, they stood together, united in their mission, ready to face the darkness and to light the way for those who needed it most. For as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the serene retreat center, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun. They had come a long way since the tragic day when they had launched their mobile app, a beacon of hope for survivors navigating the treacherous waters of domestic abuse. It had been a journey filled with heartache, but also with moments of profound triumph. The app, named Hope in Motion, had quickly gained traction, offering a wealth of resources and support to those in need. It had become a lifeline for countless individuals, providing them with a sense of community and solace that they had longed for. But the founders knew that this was just the beginning. They had to do more, reach further, and ensure that no one ever felt isolated in their struggle. To that end, they had initiated a series of retreats, each designed to offer survivors a safe haven where they could heal, reconnect with themselves, and find the strength to move forward. The retreats were meticulously planned, featuring workshops, therapy sessions, and activities that encouraged self-discovery and personal growth. The founders often found themselves at the heart of these gatherings, sharing their own stories and offering words of encouragement. As the years passed, the foundation's reach expanded, drawing in volunteers from all walks of life. They were a diverse group, united by a common purpose, and their unwavering commitment to the cause was nothing short of inspiring. They worked tirelessly, from organizing events to raising funds, from providing direct support to survivors to advocating for policy changes that would protect those at risk. The founders had faced many challenges along the way. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of the mission seemed insurmountable. But they pushed through, fueled by the stories of those they had helped and the hope that each survivor held within them. They had seen the transformation in the eyes of those who had once felt lost, who had found a reason to keep fighting. The foundation's work had not gone unnoticed. They had garnered attention from media outlets, which had showcased their efforts and brought the issue of domestic violence to the forefront of public consciousness. Celebrities had also taken notice, using their platforms to spread awareness and lend their support to the cause. The foundation had become more than just a local initiative. It had become a national movement, a force for change that was gaining momentum. Yet, despite the progress they had made, the founders remained acutely aware that the fight was far from over. There were still countless individuals suffering in silence, trapped in cycles of abuse that seemed inescapable. It was these people who kept them going, who reminded them of the importance of their mission. One evening, as they gathered around a crackling campfire, the founders reflected on their journey. They had come a long way, but they knew that the road ahead was still fraught with obstacles. They had to continue to educate, to advocate, to provide support. They had to be the voice for those who could not speak for themselves. As they shared stories and laughter, the founders realized that they had become something more than just survivors of domestic violence. They had become leaders, inspirations, and symbols of hope. They had shown that even in the darkest of times, there was a light that could be shown, a path that could be followed. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders knew that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. Together, they would continue to fight, to heal, and to inspire, ensuring that the legacy of the Watts family would live on in the hearts and actions of those who carried their story forward. In the shadow of the Watts family murders, where the lives of 6 innocent souls were shattered, a new dawn emerged from the darkness. Christopher Lee Watts, the monstrous architect of this tragedy, had left behind a legacy of horror, but also a spark of inspiration. The survivors, shattered yet resilient, banded together to create the Watts Family Memorial Foundation. They understood the complexities of healthy relationships and the subtle warning signs of abuse, and they were determined to prevent such horrors from recurring. They launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a beacon of hope in the midst of chaos. The app offered a wealth of information, from emergency contacts to counseling services, ensuring that those in need could access help at the touch of a button. But the founders knew that a digital presence was not enough. They needed to create a tangible space for survivors to heal and find solace. Thus, they initiated a series of retreats, carefully designed to offer a safe haven where survivors could reconnect with themselves, away from the judgmental eyes of the world. Each retreat was a sanctuary, filled with compassionate professionals, peer support, and activities that encouraged self-discovery and healing. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their resolve unyielding despite the overwhelming grief and the relentless media scrutiny. They knew that their journey was far from over. There were still countless lives affected by domestic violence, countless stories that needed to be told, and countless battles that had to be fought. Yet, they also knew that they were not alone. They had the unwavering support of their community, the dedication of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had transcended its original purpose. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. The foundation's work was multifaceted, reaching out to survivors, educating the public, and advocating for policy changes that would protect vulnerable individuals. They organized workshops, seminars, and awareness campaigns, using their platform to amplify the voices of those who had been silenced. They partnered with local and national organizations, pooling resources and expertise to create a network of support that was both comprehensive and accessible. As the foundation grew, so did its impact. They had helped countless survivors find the strength to break free from abusive relationships, to rebuild their lives, and to find a path to healing. They had educated countless individuals about the signs of abuse, empowering them to intervene and prevent further tragedies. They had influenced policy, pushing for stricter laws and more effective support systems for survivors. And through it all, the founders remained focused on the core of their mission, to ensure that no one would ever have to face the terror of domestic violence alone. They had become the living embodiment of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a symbol of unity, a beacon of light in the face of darkness. And as long as there was hope, as long as there was a single survivor in need, the foundation would continue to fight, to advocate, to heal, and to remind the world that love should never be a weapon, and that there was always a way out, a path to safety, and a future worth fighting for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the sprawling cityscape, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission but their resolve unshaken. They had come a long way since the day they had learned about the tragic fate of the Watts family, a story that had shattered their perception of healthy relationships and revealed the chilling reality of abuse. That harrowing discovery had led them to launch a mobile app, a beacon of hope for survivors who found themselves in dire need of resources and support on the go. The app was a testament to their commitment, a tool designed to empower survivors with the knowledge and strength they needed to break free from the chains of abuse. But the founders knew that the app was just the beginning. They recognized that the journey to healing was a long and arduous one, filled with challenges and setbacks. To address this, they initiated a series of retreats, creating a safe haven where survivors could gather, share their stories, and find solace in the company of others who had walked a similar path. These retreats were not just about healing. They were about fostering a sense of community, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggles. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their passion undiminished by the years that had passed. They understood that their journey was far from over. There were countless more lives to touch, countless more battles to fight against the insidious tendrils of domestic violence that seemed to wrap themselves around society like a suffocating shroud. Yet, they also knew that they were not alone in this fight. They had the unwavering support of their community, a network of volunteers who were as dedicated to the cause as they were, and the indomitable hope that fueled their every endeavor. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had transcended its original purpose. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness that shrouded the issue of domestic violence. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there was always a glimmer of light to be found. The foundation was more than just a name. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon of strength for those who had been shrouded in the shadows of abuse. As the years rolled on, the foundation continued to grow, expanding its reach and solidifying its presence in the fight against domestic violence. They launched workshops, seminars, and awareness campaigns, all aimed at educating the public about the warning signs of abuse and the importance of intervening when necessary. They worked tirelessly to create a world where no one would ever have to suffer in silence, where survivors would be met with compassion and understanding, and where the cycle of abuse could be broken for good. The founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become symbols of hope, their faces etched into the memories of those who had found solace in their work. They had faced countless obstacles, from skepticism to outright opposition, but they had never wavered. They had learned that the fight against domestic violence was not just a battle for justice. It was a battle for humanity, a battle to protect the most vulnerable among us. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most. They would continue to remind survivors that they were not alone, that there was a future worth fighting for, and that they had the power to overcome even the darkest of times. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation was more than a foundation. It was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a testament to the belief that love, compassion, and resilience could triumph over even the most formidable of adversaries. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the Watts Family Memorial Foundation, the founders gathered in the serene garden, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission but their spirits unyielding. They had come a long way since the days when they were mere whispers of a movement, when the pain of their own experiences was still raw and the scars of abuse still fresh. Now, they stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. The foundation had grown from a small group of survivors and supporters to a vast network of advocates, each one a story of survival, each one a reminder that healing was possible even in the darkest of times. The founders had launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a lifeline in the midst of chaos. They had even started a series of retreats for survivors, offering them a safe space to heal and reconnect with themselves, to find strength in the solidarity of others who had walked the same treacherous path. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their determination unwavering. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The foundation had become more than just a place to seek refuge. It had become a sanctuary, a place where survivors could find solace, where they could learn to love themselves again, where they could dream of a future that was not defined by the past. The founders often reflected on the warning signs of abuse that had been so easily overlooked, the subtle cues that could have saved lives. They had learned that abuse did not always manifest in the dramatic ways society often portrayed it, but in the quiet, insidious ways that chipped away at a person's self-worth and sense of security. They had learned that abuse could happen to anyone, regardless of age, gender, or social status, and that it was a crime that must be eradicated from society's fabric. In the face of such darkness, the founders had found a light that came from within and from the countless individuals who had reached out for help. They had seen the power of community, the power of solidarity, the power of hope. They had seen the strength of survivors who had overcome their past and chosen to fight for a better future. And they had seen the power of their own mission, a mission that was not just about healing the wounds of the past, but about building a future where domestic violence was a thing of the past. The founders knew that their work was far from finished. They knew that every survivor they helped was one step closer to a world without abuse, but they also knew that there was much more work to be done. They were determined to continue their fight, to continue to reach out to those in need, to continue to provide support and resources, to continue to spread awareness and education about the realities of domestic violence. As they stood in the garden, the founders felt a profound sense of purpose, a sense that their lives had been given new meaning through their work. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, fighting for a cause greater than themselves. They were not just leaders of a foundation, they were architects of change, building a future where every individual could live free from fear and violence. The founders looked around at the faces of their volunteers, their hearts swelling with gratitude. They knew that their journey was a collective one, that their success was dependent on the dedication and compassion of those who stood with them. And as they stood together, united in their mission, they felt a profound sense of strength, a strength that came from the knowledge that they were not alone, that they were part of something much larger than themselves. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, as long as there were survivors who needed their help, as long as there were volunteers ready to lend their support, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. In the shadow of the Watts family murders, a tragic event that shook the community to its core, a group of survivors and advocates emerged with a resolute determination to turn their pain into purpose. Christopher Lee Watts, the perpetrator, had left a trail of destruction and despair, but it was the strength of those he had hurt that would ultimately rise above the darkness. They launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a beacon of light in a world that often felt devoid of hope. The app offered a wealth of information, from legal assistance to counseling services, ensuring that those affected by domestic violence had access to the help they needed, no matter where they were. But the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation knew that an app was just the beginning. They organized a series of retreats for survivors, creating a safe space where they could heal and reconnect with themselves, away from the chaos and reminders of their past traumas. These retreats became sanctuaries, where survivors could share their stories, find solace in each other's company, and begin to rebuild their lives. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, driven by a profound understanding of the warning signs of abuse and the importance of healthy relationships. They were not just survivors, they were educators, mentors, and leaders, determined to spread awareness and prevent future acts of violence. They traveled to schools, community centers, and workplaces, delivering powerful speeches that resonated with audiences young and old. Their message was clear: domestic violence is a silent epidemic that demands attention and action. The Foundation's efforts did not go unnoticed. They garnered support from across the country, with volunteers stepping forward to help in any way they could. These volunteers became an integral part of the Foundation's mission, dedicating their time and energy to ensure that survivors had the resources and support they needed to rebuild their lives. As the Foundation grew, so did its influence. They partnered with local and national organizations, leveraging their combined resources to create a more comprehensive support system for survivors. They organized workshops and training sessions for law enforcement and social workers, equipping them with the knowledge and tools to better respond to domestic violence cases. The Foundation also worked tirelessly to change policies and laws, advocating for stricter penalties for abusers and more robust protections for survivors. Through their relentless efforts, they were able to bring about significant changes, ensuring that the voices of survivors were heard and their rights were protected. But the founders never lost sight of the fact that their journey was far from over. They knew that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. The statistics were sobering. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men in the United States have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. These numbers represented a staggering number of people who needed help, and the foundation was committed to reaching them all. They continued to expand their mobile app, adding new features and resources, and they worked to make the retreats more accessible to survivors across the country. They also launched a scholarship program to help survivors pursue higher education, providing them with the tools they needed to build a brighter future. The founders also recognized that their fight was not just about survivors. It was about ending the cycle of violence that plagues so many families. They began a focus on prevention, working with parents and educators to teach children about healthy relationships and the warning signs of abuse from a young age. They knew that by educating the next generation, they could prevent future generations from falling victim to domestic violence. As the foundation continued to grow, it became more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. It was a testament to the resilience and strength of those who had survived, and a reminder that hope could indeed be found even in the darkest of times. The founders were not alone in their mission. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The foundation's work had a ripple effect, inspiring others to take action and join the fight against domestic violence. They had become a beacon of light in a world that often felt overwhelmed by darkness, proving that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there was always a way to rise above and make a difference. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood as a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and the enduring human spirit, proving that even in the wake of tragedy, love and hope could triumph. In the shadow of the tragic Watts family murders, where the once healthy relationships of the Watts family were turned into a chilling nightmare, a group of determined individuals rose from the ashes to forge a new beginning. They were not just survivors, but now they were the architects of a movement, a beacon of hope for those trapped in the clutches of domestic violence. They launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a lifeline that didn't require a connection to a computer or a stable internet connection. It was a tool that could be accessed at any time, in any place, ensuring that no survivor felt isolated or forgotten. The founders, driven by their own harrowing experiences, knew that the journey to healing was a long one, filled with setbacks and challenges. Yet, they were steadfast in their resolve to create a world where domestic violence had no place. They initiated a series of retreats for survivors, safe havens where they could heal and reconnect with themselves amidst the chaos that had once consumed their lives. These retreats were not just places to rest and recover. They were workshops, counseling sessions, and gatherings where survivors could share their stories, learn from each other, and find strength in their collective resilience. Through it all, the founders remained focused on their mission, understanding that their work was far from complete. There were countless more lives to touch, countless more battles to fight, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the unwavering support of their community, a network of volunteers who were as passionate as they were about ending domestic violence. These volunteers came from all walks of life, each bringing their own unique skills and perspectives to the cause. Together, they formed a formidable force, a team that believed in the power of unity and the possibility of change. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had transcended its original purpose. It had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome darkness. It was a force for change that would not be deterred by the complexities of domestic violence, a movement that was determined to shed light on the issue and help those in the shadows find their way back into the light. As the foundation grew, so did its influence, reaching more survivors, more communities, and more hearts. But the founders never lost sight of the personal nature of their mission. They were not just fighting for statistics. They were fighting for individual lives, for the children who had lost their parents, for the women who had been betrayed, for the men who had been silenced. They reminded everyone that behind every statistic was a human being with a story, a pain, and a hope. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most. They would continue to offer resources, to hold retreats, to advocate for change, and to remind survivors that they were not alone. They would fight for a future worth fighting for, a future where domestic violence was a thing of the past, a future where every individual could live without fear and with dignity. The Foundation's message spread far and wide, resonating with people from all corners of the globe. It sparked conversations, inspired actions, and brought together allies who shared the same vision. The founders knew that their work was never done, that every victory was a step forward, and every setback was an opportunity to learn and grow stronger. As they continued their mission, they were reminded of the words of a wise leader who once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." The founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation believed in that arc, in the power of justice, and in the inherent goodness of humanity. They were committed to bending that arc as far as they could, to ensuring that the future was one of hope, healing, and safety for all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the serene retreat center, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission, but their resolve unyielding. They had come a long way since the tragic events that had shattered their lives, and now they were determined to turn that pain into purpose. The foundation had grown from a seed of hope into a towering oak, its branches spreading wide to offer shelter and solace to those who had walked the treacherous path of domestic violence. The founders had poured their hearts and souls into creating a mobile app that was more than just a tool. It was a lifeline for survivors. With a simple tap, users could access a wealth of resources, from emergency hotlines to legal aid, all designed to empower them in their fight for freedom. They had also started a series of retreats, each one a sanctuary where survivors could find solace, healing, and the strength to rebuild their lives. These retreats were not just about providing a safe space. They were about fostering a sense of community, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggles. The founders had faced many challenges along the way, from skepticism to outright opposition, but they had pressed on, driven by the stories of those they had helped. They had seen the transformation in the eyes of survivors who had found the courage to break free from the chains of abuse, and it was those moments that fueled their passion. They knew that their work was never done, that there were still countless individuals trapped in the cycle of domestic violence, waiting for someone to reach out and help them. But they also knew that they were not alone in this fight. They had the support of a community that had rallied around them, volunteers who had dedicated their time and talents to the cause, and a network of allies who believed in their mission. Together, they had organized awareness campaigns, fundraising events, and educational workshops, all aimed at shedding light on the dark corners of domestic violence and empowering those who were affected by it. The foundation had become more than just a place for survivors. It had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience and strength. And as the founders looked out over the retreat center, they saw the fruits of their labor. They saw the faces of survivors who had found the strength to stand up for themselves, who had learned to love themselves again, and who had discovered a future that was full of possibilities. It was in those moments that they knew they were on the right path, that their journey was making a difference. But they also knew that the fight was far from over. There were still many lives to touch, many stories to hear, and many battles to fight. The founders vowed to continue their work, to expand their reach, and to ensure that no one would ever have to face the darkness of domestic violence alone. They would continue to create resources, to organize retreats, and to advocate for change, because they believed that hope was a powerful force, and that together they could change the world. As the night deepened, the founders gathered around a campfire, sharing stories and laughter, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they were making a difference. They knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but they were ready to face them head-on, because they had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. In the shadow of the Watts family murders, a story of resilience and hope emerged as the survivors and their allies banded together to create a legacy that would honor the lives lost and empower those who had endured unimaginable horror. The founders, driven by a deep-seated desire to prevent such tragedies from repeating themselves, poured their hearts and souls into their mission. They understood that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were undeterred. They launched a mobile app that provided survivors with immediate access to resources and support, ensuring that help was just a tap away. The app became a beacon of light for those who had been shrouded in darkness, offering guidance through the labyrinth of recovery and healing. Recognizing the need for a more personal touch, they initiated a series of retreats designed to offer survivors a safe haven where they could heal and reconnect with themselves. These retreats became sanctuaries where survivors could share their stories, learn coping strategies, and find solace in the company of others who had walked a similar path. The founders, along with a dedicated team of volunteers, worked tirelessly to ensure that each retreat was a transformative experience, filled with workshops, therapy sessions, and moments of profound connection. As the foundation grew, so did its influence. The founders were invited to speak at conferences, share their story with the media, and collaborate with other organizations dedicated to ending domestic violence. They became vocal advocates for change, using their platform to raise awareness and educate the public about the warning signs of abuse and the importance of intervening early. They knew that education was key to prevention, and they were determined to equip individuals with the knowledge and tools they needed to protect themselves and others. Despite the immense pressure and the emotional toll, the founders remained steadfast in their mission. They understood that their journey was not just about healing from the past, but also about creating a future where domestic violence was a thing of the past. They were inspired by the strength and courage of the survivors they worked with, and they saw in them the hope that fueled their own determination. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. The founders had learned from their own experiences and the harrowing accounts of others that silence was the enemy, and they were committed to breaking that silence. They used their voices to amplify the stories of survivors, to bring attention to the systemic issues that allowed such violence to thrive, and to advocate for policies and programs that would protect vulnerable individuals. The Foundation's work extended beyond the United States, as they reached out to international partners to share their resources and expertise. They believed that the fight against domestic violence was a global one, and that no one country could tackle it alone. Through partnerships with organizations in Europe, Asia, and Africa, they were able to expand their reach and impact, helping to create a network of support that spanned the globe. As the years passed, the Foundation continued to grow and evolve. They launched additional programs, including legal aid services for survivors, scholarships for students affected by domestic violence, and initiatives aimed at empowering children and teens to recognize and prevent abuse. They also worked to engage men in the conversation about masculinity and healthy relationships, hoping to change the cultural norms that often perpetuated violence. Through it all, the founders remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of hope and the enduring spirit of those who have survived the worst. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders, with their unwavering dedication and unwavering belief in the potential for change, had turned a tragedy into a catalyst for a brighter tomorrow. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. As the founders, Sarah and John, stood before the crowd at the annual vigil, their voices cracked with emotion as they shared the story of their loss and the birth of their mission. They had faced unimaginable tragedy with the murders of their loved ones, but they had chosen to channel their grief into something powerful and transformative. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The mobile app they had launched, Healing Hands, had become an invaluable tool for survivors, providing them with resources and support on the go, from safety plans to legal assistance to mental health counseling. The series of retreats they had started had offered survivors a safe space to heal and reconnect with themselves, away from the harsh realities of the world that had shattered their lives. Each retreat was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, as survivors shared their stories, learned coping mechanisms, and forged new bonds with others who had walked a similar path. Sarah and John had also founded the Hope for Tomorrow scholarship program, providing financial assistance to children who had lost a parent to domestic violence, ensuring that they had the resources they needed to pursue their dreams. The foundation had grown, expanding its reach to include educational workshops, advocacy campaigns, and a hotline for those in immediate danger. But the founders were acutely aware that the fight against domestic violence was a marathon, not a sprint. They had to stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay resilient. They had to keep pushing forward, even when the road ahead seemed daunting and the challenges overwhelming. And so, they continued to work tirelessly, ensuring that the foundation remained a beacon of light for those who had found themselves in the dark. The foundation had become a place of healing and hope, a place where survivors could find solace and strength. They had organized community events, awareness campaigns, and partnerships with local law enforcement and social service agencies to ensure that everyone had access to the resources they needed. They had also worked tirelessly to educate the public about the warning signs of abuse, the impact of domestic violence on children, and the importance of intervention and support. As the years passed, the Foundation's work had ripple effects that reached far beyond the community it had initially served. They had influenced policy changes, improved law enforcement response to domestic violence incidents, and raised the national conversation about the issue. The founders had become role models for resilience and advocacy, inspiring others to stand up against abuse and support survivors. But they were not done yet. There were still too many stories of pain and suffering, too many lives that needed to be touched. They knew that the fight was ongoing, that the battles would be numerous, and that the road would be fraught with challenges. But they also knew that as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of love, loss, and redemption. And as the founders stood together, their resolve unshaken, they knew that their mission would continue to inspire and empower, ensuring that the legacy of their loved ones lived on in the lives they touched and the change they wrought. In the heart of a bustling city, where the sounds of life merged with the echoes of pain from years past, the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood as a beacon of light amidst the darkness of domestic violence. Founded by the resilient survivors of the Christopher Lee Watts family murders, the organization had grown from a humble seedling of hope into a mighty oak tree of change. Its roots were deep and its branches wide, reaching out to those who had been shrouded in silence, providing a safe haven where survivors could finally break free from the chains of abuse and find solace. The founders, with their own harrowing tales of survival, understood the power of sharing their experiences. They knew that every story was a lesson, every pain a testament to the strength that lay within each survivor. Thus, they launched a mobile app that served as a virtual lifeline, providing instant access to resources, support, and community. The app featured articles, podcasts, and videos that educated users on healthy relationships and the warning signs of abuse, equipping them with the knowledge to protect themselves and others. But the founders did not stop there. They recognized the need for in-person support, and so they started a series of retreats for survivors, creating a sacred space where healing could flourish. These retreats were meticulously designed to foster a sense of community and connection, allowing participants to share their journeys and support one another. With the serene backdrop of a picturesque location, the retreats provided a temporary escape from the harsh realities of the outside world, giving survivors the chance to reconnect with themselves, their inner strengths, and their dreams. Throughout this journey, the founders remained steadfast in their mission, driven by a relentless passion for justice and the unwavering belief that every life mattered. They faced numerous challenges along the way, including setbacks, skepticism, and heartache. But they never wavered, for they were not alone. The foundation had grown beyond their expectations, amassing a dedicated community of supporters, volunteers, and allies who shared their vision of a world free from domestic violence. The volunteers, a diverse group of individuals with their own stories of overcoming adversity, brought their unique talents and passions to the foundation. They were graphic designers, videographers, therapists, lawyers, and activists, all coming together with a shared purpose. Together, they worked tirelessly to raise awareness, educate the public, and support survivors in their quest for healing and wholeness. The Foundation's efforts did not go unnoticed. News of their work spread far and wide, reaching the ears of policymakers, celebrities, and everyday citizens alike. This exposure brought both recognition and criticism, but the founders remained undeterred. They knew that the road to change was often fraught with obstacles, and they were prepared to navigate them with resilience and courage. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just an organization. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. It was a testament to the strength and resilience of human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, hope could be found, and that it was within everyone's reach to be a part of the solution. And as the foundation continued to grow and expand its reach, it never forgot its core mission: to provide support, resources, and hope to those affected by domestic violence. They were committed to being there for those who needed them most, to remind them that they were not alone and that there was a future worth fighting for. In the years that followed, the Foundation's work bore fruit in numerous ways. Survivors found solace and strength in their newfound community, and the general public became increasingly aware of the pervasive nature of domestic violence and the importance of addressing it proactively. Laws and policies were enacted, services were improved, and the conversation surrounding domestic violence shifted, moving from silence to solidarity. The founders, though they were humble and often shunned the limelight, remained at the heart of the movement. They were the faces of the Foundation, the living embodiment of its mission, and their unwavering commitment inspired countless others to join the fight. They had shown that one person's courage could spark a movement, and that together, they could make a significant impact on the lives of countless individuals. As the Foundation looked to the future, they were filled with a sense of purpose and a vision for a better world. They knew that the road ahead was long and arduous, but they were prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. They had built a foundation upon which a brighter future could be constructed, a future where survivors could thrive without fear, where the seeds of change would take root and flourish. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood as a testament to the enduring power of hope, a symbol of the unbreakable bond between survivors and their supporters. And as long as there was a need, as long as there was darkness to be illuminated, the foundation would continue its mission, determined to make a difference, one life at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the serene retreat center, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their hearts filled with a mix of gratitude and determination. They had come a long way since the harrowing days of the Watts family murders, when their lives had been turned upside down by the unimaginable loss of loved ones to domestic violence. Yet through the heartache and the chaos, they had found a purpose that transcended their personal grief, the mission to prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. The founders had once been the epitome of healthy relationships, a family known for their love and support. But as they delved deeper into the warning signs of abuse that had plagued their own lives and those of countless others, they realized that their journey was one of transformation. It was a journey from victims to survivors, from pain to power, and from darkness to light. With this newfound clarity, they launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, ensuring that help was just a tap away. They also initiated a series of retreats, creating a safe space for survivors to heal and reconnect with themselves. Each retreat was meticulously planned, offering workshops, therapy sessions, and activities designed to foster self-discovery and resilience. Through it all, the founders remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The retreat center buzzed with activity as survivors from all walks of life gathered to share their stories, to find solace in the camaraderie of others who had endured similar horrors. The founders, along with a team of dedicated counselors and volunteers, worked tirelessly to ensure that each person who walked through the gates left with a sense of empowerment and a renewed spirit. One such survivor, Sarah, had been haunted by the memories of her abusive relationship for years. She had struggled to find the strength to break free, to seek help, and to start anew. But the retreat had been a turning point. The workshops on self-care, the support from other survivors, and the wisdom shared by the founders had given her the courage to move forward. "This place," she whispered to a friend as they sat by the fire, "has been a beacon of hope in the darkest times." The founders watched as Sarah's transformation unfolded before their eyes, and they couldn't help but feel a profound sense of fulfillment. They had created a space where survivors could heal, where they could find the strength to rebuild their lives, and where they could know that they were not alone in their fight for freedom. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the foundation continued to grow, expanding its reach and impact. They partnered with local organizations, schools, and government agencies to educate the public about the signs of abuse and the importance of intervention. They hosted conferences, seminars, and workshops, aiming to raise awareness and create a dialogue that would lead to change. One evening, as the founders gathered in the retreat center's library, they were joined by a group of young students eager to learn about the foundation's mission. The founders shared their own stories, their experiences with domestic violence, and the importance of standing up for themselves and for others. The students listened intently, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and determination. One of the students, a young girl named Emily, raised her hand and asked, "What can we do to help?" The founders smiled, knowing that this was the question they had been waiting to hear. "You can start by educating yourself," they replied. "Learn about the signs of abuse, speak up when you see something, and most importantly, believe those who come forward to share their stories." As the evening drew to a close, the founders felt a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that their work was just beginning, that the fight against domestic violence was a marathon, not a sprint. But they also knew that with each step, each victory, and each life touched, they were making a difference. Years passed, and the Watts Family Memorial Foundation continued to thrive. They had helped countless survivors find their voice, had educated thousands on the signs of abuse, and had fought tirelessly to change the narrative around domestic violence. And while the founders often reflected on the pain and loss that had led them to this mission, they also celebrated the countless lives saved and the hope that continued to fuel their work. One evening, as they sat around a campfire, the founders shared a toast. They raised their glasses, not just to the foundation they had built, but to the future, to the lives that had been touched, and to the hope that would continue to guide them. To the survivors, to the fighters, and to the dreamers, they toasted, their voices filled with passion and purpose. To a world where no one has to suffer in silence, where every voice is heard, and where love and respect are the norm, not the exception. And as they sipped their drinks, the founders knew that their journey was far from over. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, they had their community, and they had the unwavering belief that one day their mission would be realized. And in that moment, amidst the flickering flames and the echoes of laughter, they felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that they were making a difference, one life at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the sprawling cityscape, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together on the rooftop of their modest office building, their faces etched with determination and hope. They had come a long way since the tragic loss of their loved ones at the hands of a monster, and the weight of their grief had been lifted by the knowledge that they were not just survivors, but also champions of a cause that needed to be heard. The mobile app they had created had been downloaded by thousands, providing a lifeline to those who had found themselves trapped in the cycles of abuse. It was a beacon of light in the darkest of times, offering resources, support, and a community that understood the pain all too well. But the founders knew that their work was far from done. They had to keep pushing forward to reach more people, to ensure that no one ever had to face the same terror that had shattered their own lives. So they started a series of retreats, secluded safe havens where survivors could gather, share their stories, and begin the long and arduous journey of healing. The retreats were meticulously planned, with a team of professionals who understood the intricacies of trauma and recovery, and each session was designed to build resilience and foster a sense of belonging. The founders had become the faces of the foundation, their voices echoing through conferences and television screens, advocating for policy changes and raising awareness about the insidious nature of domestic violence. They had appeared on countless talk shows, documentaries, and news segments, sharing their personal experiences and the lessons they had learned along the way. Their message was clear: no one deserves to live in fear, and no one should have to face this alone. But as they stood on that rooftop, they realized that their strength came from the collective efforts of their volunteers. These dedicated individuals were the backbone of the foundation, tirelessly working behind the scenes to make a difference. They were the ones who answered the phones, the ones who responded to crisis calls, the ones who provided support to those in need. They were the unsung heroes, the ones who made the foundation's work possible. The founders also knew that their fight was not just against domestic violence, but against the societal norms that allowed such violence to thrive. They had to challenge the stereotypes, the myths, and the silence that had shrouded the issue for far too long. They had to educate, to inform, to empower. And they had to do it all while balancing their own lives, their own healing, and the relentless pursuit of their mission. As the night deepened, the founders exchanged a knowing glance. They had faced their own demons, they had lost everything, but they had chosen to rise above the darkness. They had chosen to fight, to advocate, to inspire. And in doing so, they had become a symbol of hope for countless others who were struggling to find their way out of the shadows. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, As long as there were survivors, as long as there was a future worth fighting for, the founders would continue their tireless work, driven by the memory of their loved ones, and the promise that one day the world would be a safer place for all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the serene retreat center nestled in the heart of the countryside, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood together, their faces etched with determination and resolve. They had come a long way since the harrowing days when they had to face the unimaginable loss of their loved ones to domestic violence. It had been a journey marked by pain, heartache, and a relentless pursuit of justice, but also one filled with the unwavering belief that their story could be a beacon of hope for others. The foundation had started as a whisper, a small group of friends and family members who had gathered to honor the memory of the Watts family and to address the silent epidemic of domestic violence. But as the founders delved deeper into their mission, they realized that the need for awareness and support was far greater than they had ever imagined. They had launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a lifeline for those who were struggling to find their way out of the darkness. The app was a testament to their commitment, a tool that could be accessed anywhere, anytime, and it had quickly become a staple for many survivors. But the founders knew that an app was just the beginning. They had to create a space where survivors could truly heal, a place where they could find solace and strength. And so, they had started a series of retreats for survivors, offering them a safe and supportive environment to reconnect with themselves, to rediscover their voices, and to learn the skills they needed to rebuild their lives. The retreats were more than just gatherings. They were a sanctuary, a place where survivors could share their stories, learn from each other, and find the courage to move forward. Through it all, the founders remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. They had faced their own demons, had to confront the warning signs of abuse that had been overlooked or ignored, and had emerged stronger for it. They understood the complexities of domestic violence, the insidious nature of abuse, and the courage it took to break free from its grasp. They were living proof that it was possible to survive, to thrive, and to turn tragedy into triumph. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The foundation had become more than just a place for survivors. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. They had seen the impact of their work, had witnessed the transformation of survivors who had found strength in each other, and had been inspired to continue their fight. The founders had become the faces of hope, the voices of change, and the champions of the marginalized. They had stood before audiences, shared their stories, and called for action, demanding that society recognize the gravity of domestic violence and the need for comprehensive support systems. They had worked tirelessly, traveled across the country, and even internationally to spread their message, to educate, and to empower. And as they stood on the deck of the retreat center, gazing out over the tranquil lake, they knew that their work was far from finished. There were still countless survivors who needed their help, who were trapped in cycles of abuse, who were struggling to find their way. But they were undeterred, their resolve unshaken. They had seen the power of unity, the strength of community, and the resilience of the human spirit. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, as long as there were survivors who believed in a future worth fighting for, there would be a foundation to fight for them, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a world where they could find safety, support, and the chance to rebuild their lives. The founders had learned that healing was a journey, one that required patience, compassion, and unwavering dedication. They had become the guides, the mentors, the friends that survivors needed, and they were determined to walk with them every step of the way. They had turned their personal tragedy into a mission, their pain into purpose, and their loss into a legacy of hope and resilience. As the night deepened, the founders shared stories, laughed, and cried, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that the road ahead would be challenging, that they would face obstacles and setbacks, but they were prepared. They had each other, they had the survivors they had helped, and they had the unwavering belief that together they could make a difference. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood united, their hearts full of gratitude, their minds focused on the future. They were ready to continue their fight to spread their message, and to ensure that the legacy of the Watts family would live on, not as a testament to tragedy, but as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the Watts Family Memorial Foundation, the founders stood together, their spirits unbroken despite the countless hours spent in the fight against domestic violence. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, since the harrowing events that had propelled them into this advocacy role. The mobile app they had launched had quickly become a beacon of hope for survivors, offering them immediate access to resources and support wherever they were, be it in a quiet corner of a coffee shop or on the bustling streets of a city. The series of retreats they had organized had served as sanctuaries for healing, allowing survivors to gather, share their stories, and find strength in numbers. The founders had faced skepticism, doubt, and even criticism along the way, but they had held fast to their vision. They understood that every step forward was a victory, every survivor supported was a life saved, and every conversation about domestic violence was a step towards breaking the silence that allowed such violence to thrive. They had witnessed the transformation of survivors, seen the pain slowly fade into determination, and felt the profound impact of their work on the community. The foundation had grown from a modest initiative into a recognized force for change, and its influence had spread far beyond the boundaries of their original mission. Volunteers poured in from all walks of life, each bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the cause. They were lawyers, therapists, educators, artists, and activists, all united by a common goal of ending domestic violence. The founders had become mentors and role models, their own experiences with abuse shaping them into advocates who knew firsthand the power of empathy and understanding. They had also become relentless in their pursuit of justice, tirelessly working to hold abusers accountable, and to ensure that survivors received the care and resources they needed to rebuild their lives. The foundation's efforts had not gone unnoticed. They had garnered media attention, received accolades, and even inspired legislation that aimed to protect survivors and punish abusers. But the founders remained grounded, knowing that the fight was far from over. They had seen too many stories of survivors who had fallen through the cracks, too many cases where justice was delayed or denied. They were committed to changing that, to ensuring that every survivor had a voice, an advocate, and a path to safety and healing. In the face of such daunting challenges, the founders had found solace in the bonds they had forged with one another and with their supporters. They had built a network of resilience, a community that believed in the power of hope and the possibility of a world free from domestic violence. They had learned to navigate the complexities of their mission, to balance their own healing with their advocacy, and to maintain their focus on the ultimate goal. The foundation's work had taken them to schools, community centers, and conferences, where they shared their stories and educated others about the warning signs of abuse, the importance of healthy relationships, and the resources available to those in need. They had become educators, mentors, and friends to countless individuals, each connection strengthening their resolve to continue the fight. As they stood in the dim light of the fading day, the founders knew that the road ahead would be filled with more challenges, more heartache, and more victories. But they were prepared, ready to face whatever came their way with the same unwavering determination that had brought them this far. They had become symbols of hope, of resilience, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. and as long as there was a single survivor in need, they would be there, steadfast in their mission, fighting for a future where every person could live free from the shadow of domestic violence. As the years waned, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood resolute, their commitment to eradicating domestic violence and supporting survivors unwavering. They had weathered the storms of doubt and skepticism, but the stories of triumph and healing that emerged from their retreats fueled their fire. They had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of fundraising, often facing setbacks but never giving up. With every successful event, they gathered momentum, attracting sponsors and supporters who believed in their cause. The foundation's mobile app had evolved, now offering personalized support and connecting survivors with a network of advocates and counselors. They introduced webinars and online forums where individuals could share their experiences, find solace, and offer comfort to those walking a similar path. The retreats, once a small-scale initiative, grew exponentially, attracting participants from across the nation, each seeking sanctuary and the strength to move forward. The founders, though exhausted, found solace in the testimonials of those whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's efforts. They were a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Yet, they remained aware that there was much work to be done. Domestic violence remained a pervasive issue, shrouded in silence and often ignored. With each passing year, the foundation expanded its reach, launching educational programs in schools and communities to raise awareness about the warning signs of abuse and the importance of fostering healthy relationships. They partnered with local law enforcement, mental health professionals, and social service agencies to create a cohesive network that would protect and support victims. The founders, fueled by a passion for justice and a deep empathy for those affected by domestic violence, began to see their vision materialize. They witnessed the dismantling of barriers, the creation of safe havens, and the growth of a movement that would not be contained. They understood that change would be gradual, but they were relentless in their pursuit. Amidst the chaos of a world still grappling with the horrors of domestic violence, the Watts Family Memorial Foundation became a beacon of hope. They were not just a foundation, they were a catalyst for change, a reminder that every voice matters and that the fight for justice is one worth waging. With every survivor they supported, every life they saved, and every heart they touched, they were not only honoring the memory of the Watts family, but also planting seeds of hope that would one day flourish into a world free from the chains of abuse. In the face of adversity, the founders of the foundation remained steadfast, their dedication to their mission unyielding. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were prepared to face them head-on. For them, it was not just a battle for the living. It was a testament to the lives lost, a fight for the future, and a promise to those who had suffered in silence that their voices would be heard, their stories told, and their rights protected. As the foundation continued to grow, it became clear that their impact was far-reaching. They were not just providing support to individuals, they were changing the landscape of how society viewed and addressed domestic violence. The foundation had become a cornerstone in the fight against this insidious crime, a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. Through their unwavering determination, the founders had created an organization that was not only a safe haven for survivors but also a place of empowerment. They had inspired others to join the fight, to speak out, and to demand change. And while they knew that the road ahead was long and arduous, they were undeterred. They had seen the power of community, the strength of resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of those who had survived. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest of times, there is light to be found. The founders had taken the tragedy of the Watts family murders and transformed it into a movement that would leave an indelible mark on the fight against domestic violence. And as long as there was a single voice that needed to be heard, a single heart that needed to be healed, a single life that needed to be protected, they would continue to fight, to advocate, and to hope that one day the world would be a place where no one would have to suffer in silence. In the wake of the harrowing revelations of the Watts family murders, the world was left reeling, but within the shattered lives of the survivors, a quiet resolve began to take root. Christopher Lee Watts, the man who had claimed the lives of his own family, had left behind a trail of destruction and despair. Yet it was through this tragedy that the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation found their calling. They were ordinary people, touched by the unimaginable pain of abuse, and they were determined to turn that pain into a force for good. They launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, ensuring that help was just a tap away, no matter where they were. The app became a lifeline, offering guidance through the mire of trauma, and it was just the beginning of their mission. They also started a series of retreats for survivors, creating a safe space where they could heal and reconnect with themselves. These retreats were more than just getaways. They were sanctuaries, where the echoes of past pain could be hushed and replaced with the sound of healing laughter and the touch of understanding hands. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, knowing that their journey was far from over. They were well aware that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. It was a beacon of light in the midst of the shadow, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was a path forward. The founders, driven by a relentless passion, worked tirelessly to spread awareness, to educate the public about the warning signs of abuse, and to empower survivors to seek help. They traveled to schools, churches, and community centers, sharing their story and the stories of others who had survived the clutches of abuse. As the foundation grew, so did its reach. They began to partner with local and national organizations, pooling resources and expertise to create a more comprehensive support system for survivors. They hosted workshops, seminars, and conferences, bringing together experts in psychology, law enforcement, and social services to discuss strategies for prevention and intervention. The founders were relentless in their pursuit of justice, advocating for stronger laws and more effective support services for survivors. Through it all, the founders remained focused on the heart of their mission, to provide hope and healing to those who had been affected by domestic violence. They knew that every survivor had a unique journey, and they were committed to walking alongside them, offering support and guidance every step of the way. They understood that recovery was a process, one that required patience, compassion, and a willingness to face the worst of the past without being defined by it. The foundation's efforts were not without their challenges. They faced skepticism, resistance, and even outright hostility from those who refused to acknowledge the prevalence of domestic violence. But the founders never wavered. They believed in the power of their message, and they knew that the more they spoke out, the more they would inspire others to join the fight. They were undeterred by the naysayers, and they continued to reach out to educate and to support, knowing that every voice raised could potentially save a life. As the foundation grew, so too did the number of survivors who found solace in its embrace. They shared their stories, their triumphs, and their struggles, and together they forged a community of resilience and strength. The founders, along with their dedicated volunteers, worked tirelessly to ensure that each survivor had access to the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. They helped them find shelter, legal representation, and therapy, and they provided them with a network of support that extended far beyond the walls of the foundation. The foundation's impact was felt not just in the lives of survivors, but in the broader community as well. By shining a light on the issue of domestic violence, they had sparked a conversation that was long overdue. People began to talk about abuse, to recognize the signs, and to take action when they saw them. The foundation had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, there was always a way forward. As the years passed, the foundation continued to evolve, expanding its services and deepening its commitment to the cause. They launched new programs, including support groups for children who had witnessed domestic violence, and they began to offer scholarships to survivors who were seeking to further their education and break the cycle of abuse. They worked with schools to implement anti-bullying campaigns, hoping to prevent the cycle of violence from starting anew. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their passion undiminished by the passage of time. They knew that their journey was long, that the road ahead was fraught with obstacles, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of hope, and a beacon of light in the fight against domestic violence. In the wake of the harrowing revelations about Christopher Lee Watts and the Watts family murders, the community was left reeling, grappling with the grim reality of domestic violence and the chilling truth behind the seemingly normal life of the Watts family. Determined to turn tragedy into a force for good, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation set out on a mission to not only honor the memory of the victims, but to also provide support and resources to survivors. They recognized the importance of early intervention and education, understanding that many cases of domestic violence could be prevented with awareness and understanding of the warning signs. With a deep commitment to making a difference, they launched a mobile app that offered a wealth of information at the fingertips of those in need. The app included a directory of shelters, hotlines, and counseling services, as well as educational content that delved into the intricacies of abusive relationships. The founders were acutely aware that many survivors often found themselves in dire situations away from the safety of their homes, and the app aimed to serve as a lifeline for those who needed immediate assistance. But they didn't stop there. Recognizing the profound impact that a supportive environment could have on healing, they initiated a series of retreats designed specifically for survivors. These retreats were not just places to rest and reflect. They were safe havens where survivors could connect with others who had endured similar hardships, share their stories, and find strength in the solidarity of their shared experiences. The retreats also featured workshops and counseling sessions led by experts in the field of domestic violence, offering survivors tools and strategies to move forward with their lives. Throughout the process, the founders remained steadfast in their mission, their resolve undeterred by the challenges they faced. They understood that their journey was a marathon, not a sprint, and that their work would require ongoing dedication and perseverance. They were not just survivors of domestic violence themselves. They were also advocates, fighters, and leaders, determined to create a world where such violence was not tolerated. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had evolved into a movement, a force for change that would not be swayed by the shadows of darkness that domestic violence cast over lives. They had the support of their community, which rallied behind them, offering their time, resources, and unwavering belief in the cause. They had the commitment of their volunteers, who tirelessly worked to spread awareness and support survivors. And they had the hope that fueled their mission, a hope that even in the darkest of times, there was always a light shining through. As the foundation grew, so did its reach, touching the lives of countless individuals who had been affected by domestic violence. They worked tirelessly to educate schools, businesses, and religious organizations about the signs of abuse and the importance of intervening when they saw something amiss. They pushed for stricter laws and better support systems for survivors, advocating for the rights of those who had been wronged and the need for justice for the victims. The foundation's work was not without its detractors. Some criticized their approach, questioning the effectiveness of their initiatives. But the founders stood firm, knowing that every effort, no matter how small, was a step in the right direction. They had seen the impact their efforts had on the lives of survivors, and they were relentless in their pursuit of a world free from the terror of domestic violence. And so, as the foundation continued to grow and expand its reach, it became clear that the fight against domestic violence was far from over. There were still many lives to touch, many battles to fight, but the founders were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a beacon of light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, there was always a chance to rise above and create a better future. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. As the years rolled on, the Watts Family Memorial Foundation continued to grow and evolve, expanding its reach to encompass not just survivors, but also those at risk of falling into the trap of domestic abuse. The founders, driven by a deep-seated passion to make a difference, tirelessly worked to ensure that their message resonated far and wide. They organized awareness campaigns, hosting lectures and workshops in schools, universities, and community centers, educating young minds about the warning signs of abuse and the importance of healthy relationships. The mobile app they had developed had become an invaluable tool, providing survivors with immediate access to a wealth of resources, from hotlines and shelters to counseling services and support groups. It had also become a platform for survivors to share their stories, offering a sense of community and validation that many had never experienced before. The retreats, once a small gathering of survivors seeking solace, had blossomed into a series of transformative events, each one filled with workshops, therapy sessions, and opportunities for healing. The founders, determined to keep the conversation going, reached out to celebrities, influencers, and public figures, enlisting their help to spread the word and bring attention to the cause. They organized a series of high-profile events, including galas and charity auctions, which not only raised funds but also shone a spotlight on the issue. The media, too, played a pivotal role, with documentaries, interviews, and articles highlighting the foundation's work and the stories of those it had touched. Despite the challenges and setbacks, the founders remained undeterred. They understood that the fight against domestic violence was a marathon, not a sprint, and that progress would be incremental. They had learned from their own experiences and were committed to using their platform to help others navigate the treacherous waters of abuse. They knew that each person who reached out for help, each life saved, was a testament to their dedication and the power of community. As the foundation's influence expanded, so did the number of volunteers and supporters. They formed partnerships with local and national organizations, pooling resources and expertise to create a network of support that was both comprehensive and accessible. They even started a scholarship program for survivors, helping them to pursue higher education and build a better future for themselves and their families. The founders also recognized the importance of addressing the root causes of domestic violence, such as poverty, substance abuse, and mental health issues. They worked tirelessly to provide resources and support for these underlying factors, understanding that true healing could only occur when all aspects of a survivor's life were addressed. As the foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary, it was clear that the impact they had made was profound. They had helped thousands of survivors find their voice, provided them with the tools to rebuild their lives, and given them hope for a future free from the chains of abuse. But they knew that there was still much work to be done. The statistics were staggering, and the stories of those suffering in silence were far too numerous. Undeterred, the founders continued to innovate, developing new programs and initiatives to combat the issue from multiple angles. They launched a 24/7 crisis hotline, staffed by trained volunteers ready to offer support at any hour of the day or night. They also introduced a series of online workshops, making their resources accessible to those who were unable to attend in-person events. In the face of adversity, the Foundation's resilience only grew stronger. They had faced their own personal horrors and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to make a lasting impact. They understood that their journey was just the beginning, that the fight against domestic violence was a generational one that required unwavering commitment and relentless determination. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a beacon of hope for those who had been shrouded in darkness, a place where survivors could find solace, strength, and a path forward. And as long as there were those who needed them, the founders were committed to standing by their side, ensuring that no one ever had to face the horrors of abuse alone. The Foundation's legacy was one of resilience, compassion, and unwavering dedication, a testament to the power of hope and the enduring spirit of humanity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the serene retreat center where the Watts Family Memorial Foundation had established its sanctuary, the founders stood together, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission but their spirits unyielding. They had come a long way since the tragic loss of their loved ones, from the initial shock and disbelief to the relentless pursuit of justice and healing. The foundation had grown from a seed of sorrow into a mighty oak of support, and they were proud of the progress they had made. The founders had faced numerous challenges along the way, from navigating the complex legal system to dealing with the media's relentless scrutiny. But they had learned to channel their pain into purpose, turning their personal tragedy into a beacon of hope for others. They had launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, a lifeline that could be accessed with a simple tap on a smartphone screen. The app featured information on shelters, counseling services, and even a secure chat function where survivors could share their stories and find solace in the company of others who understood their pain. But the founders knew that technology alone was not enough. They had started a series of retreats for survivors, offering them a safe space to heal and reconnect with themselves. The retreats were designed to be transformative, providing workshops on self-care, mindfulness, and the power of community. They had brought in experts from various fields to share their knowledge and expertise, and the results had been nothing short of miraculous. Survivors who had once felt isolated and alone were now finding strength in the bonds they had formed with one another. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, driven by a profound sense of responsibility to ensure that no one else would have to endure the same suffering that they had. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. Domestic violence was a pervasive issue that affected countless individuals, and it was up to them to shine a light on the darkness and bring about change. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, a network of compassionate individuals who believed in their cause and were willing to lend their time, talent, and resources. They had the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, who tirelessly worked behind the scenes to keep the foundation running smoothly. And they had the hope that fueled their mission, a flickering flame that would not be extinguished by the winds of adversity. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. It had sparked a conversation, one that was long overdue, about the prevalence and impact of abuse in society. It had inspired others to take action, to speak out, and to support survivors in their quest for healing and justice. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders stood united, their eyes gleaming with determination, as they looked out over the tranquil landscape that had become their battleground. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their cause was just and their resolve unbreakable. In the shadow of the Watts family murders, a story of resilience and hope emerged. The founders, driven by a profound sense of purpose, turned their grief into a beacon of light for others. They understood the complexities of healthy relationships and the warning signs of abuse, and they launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go. This app became a lifeline, offering guidance and solace to those who had been left in the aftermath of domestic violence. But the founders knew that technology alone was not enough. They needed to create a physical space where survivors could heal and reconnect with themselves. Thus, they started a series of retreats designed to offer a safe haven where survivors could find solace, share their stories, and learn to rebuild their lives. As the foundation grew, so did its reach. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their hearts heavy with the weight of the past but filled with determination for the future. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. The founders, along with their dedicated team, worked tirelessly to raise awareness, to educate the public about the signs of abuse, and to advocate for stronger laws and policies that would protect survivors. They organized workshops, seminars, and conferences, bringing together experts, survivors, and advocates to share knowledge and experiences. Through their efforts, the foundation had already helped countless individuals find the strength to break free from abusive relationships. They had provided legal assistance, counseling, and financial support to those in need. They had also worked to create a network of support, connecting survivors with each other and with the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. But the founders knew that there was still much work to be done. They continued to expand their programs, adding new initiatives aimed at preventing domestic violence before it began. They developed a curriculum for schools, teaching students about healthy relationships and the importance of respect and consent. They partnered with local businesses and organizations to create job opportunities for survivors, helping them to become financially independent and to break the cycle of abuse. As the foundation grew, so did its influence. News of their work spread far and wide, inspiring others to take action and to support the cause. Donations poured in, allowing the foundation to expand its reach and to help even more survivors. The founders were humbled by the outpouring of support, but they remained focused on their mission, knowing that every dollar, every volunteer, and every voice counted. Despite the challenges they faced, the founders never wavered in their commitment to their cause. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that they would encounter setbacks and obstacles. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was light to be found. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders continued to work tirelessly, driven by a passion for justice and a belief in the power of human resilience. They knew that their story was just one of many, and that together, they could create a world where no one had to face the terror of domestic violence alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood united, their resolve as unyielding as the mountains that surrounded them. The journey had been fraught with pain and sorrow, but it had also been a testament to the indomitable spirit of human resilience. They had watched as the foundation they had created had grown from a seed of hope into a mighty oak, its branches stretching out to embrace those who had been touched by the darkness of domestic violence. The founders, driven by a shared passion and a deep-seated belief in the power of healing, had faced countless challenges. They had navigated the treacherous waters of legal battles, fought to ensure that the voices of survivors were heard, and worked tirelessly to dismantle the societal structures that allowed such violence to persist. Yet, through it all, they remained steadfast, their mission unwavering. The mobile app they had launched had become a beacon of hope for survivors, a lifeline that could be accessed at any time, in any place. It offered a wealth of resources, from hotlines and counseling services to support groups and educational materials, all designed to empower survivors to reclaim their lives. The retreats they had organized had provided a sanctuary for healing, a place where survivors could find solace, share their stories, and begin to piece together the shattered fragments of their existence. But the founders knew that their work was far from done. They understood that the fight against domestic violence was a marathon, not a sprint, and that the path ahead was fraught with obstacles. They had witnessed the devastating impact of such violence on families, on communities, and on society as a whole. They had seen the lives that had been torn apart, the futures that had been stolen away, and the pain that had been left in its wake. Yet, despite the darkness that seemed to envelop them at times, they found strength in the support of their community. They had the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, who had joined their cause with a fervor that was both inspiring and humbling. They had the backing of organizations and individuals who believed in their mission, who were willing to stand with them as they fought for change. And most importantly, they had hope. Hope that fueled their every move, hope that kept them going when the road ahead seemed too steep to climb. They believed that there was a future worth fighting for, a future where no one would have to suffer in silence, where survivors would be supported and empowered, and where the cycle of violence would be broken once and for all. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the enduring power of human spirit. And as they looked out over the horizon, they knew that their work was just beginning. They were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, ready to fight for those who needed them most, and ready to build a future where love and respect would triumph over fear and violence. In the shadow of the Watts family murders, a harrowing tale of loss and redemption unfolded. Christopher Lee Watts, a seemingly ordinary man, had been a master of deception, ensnaring his victims in a web of lies and violence. The survivors, once bound by the bonds of a healthy relationship, found themselves grappling with the harsh reality of abuse and its devastating consequences. They were determined not to let the memory of their loved ones fade into obscurity, and so they embarked on a mission to create a lasting legacy of hope and healing. Together, they launched a mobile app that provided a lifeline for survivors, offering a wealth of resources and support at their fingertips. The app became a beacon of light, guiding those who had been shrouded in darkness and empowering them to seek help without fear of judgment. They also initiated a series of retreats, creating safe spaces where survivors could gather, share their stories, and begin the arduous journey of healing and self-discovery. The founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation were acutely aware that their journey was fraught with challenges, but they remained steadfast in their mission. They understood that the road to recovery was long and arduous, and that there were countless individuals who needed their help. They were driven by a deep sense of purpose, fueled by the memory of those who had suffered at the hands of domestic violence and the desire to prevent such tragedies from occurring in the future. As the foundation grew, so did the support from their community. They were joined by volunteers who were passionate about making a difference, individuals who were willing to donate their time and resources to ensure that the foundation's mission would continue to thrive. The volunteers were a diverse group, each bringing their own unique skills and perspectives, but they were united by a common goal: to provide a voice for the voiceless and to offer a helping hand to those who needed it most. The Foundation's retreats were a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Survivors arrived at these retreats broken and weary, carrying the weight of their experiences on their shoulders. But over the course of a few days, they found solace in the company of others who understood their pain, and they began to piece together the fragments of their shattered lives. The retreats became a place where they could reconnect with themselves, rediscover their strengths, and chart a path forward. The founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation were not just leaders, they were visionaries, constantly seeking new ways to expand their reach and impact. They were not deterred by the darkness that still lingered in the shadows of domestic violence, for they knew that every step forward, every voice raised, was a victory in the fight against this insidious crime. They were determined to turn the page on the tragic story of the Watts family murders and to write a new chapter, one that would inspire hope and resilience. As the foundation continued to grow, so did the number of survivors who found solace in its embrace. They were reminded that they were not alone, that there was a community of supporters who believed in their journey and were committed to walking alongside them. The foundation became a beacon of light, a symbol of hope that would not be extinguished by the darkness of domestic violence. In the face of adversity, the founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation remained undeterred. They were driven by a fierce determination to make a lasting impact, to ensure that the memory of the Watts family murders would serve as a catalyst for change. They were not just survivors, they were advocates, warriors in the fight against domestic violence, and they were relentless in their pursuit of justice and healing. The foundation's work was not without its challenges. They encountered skepticism and resistance, but they never wavered in their commitment to their mission. They were undaunted by the naysayers, for they knew that the power of their message was too strong to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with, a movement that was gaining momentum with each passing day. As the foundation continued to expand its reach, they were able to touch the lives of countless individuals, providing them with the support and resources they needed to heal and rebuild their lives. They were not just providing a service, they were offering a lifeline, a chance for survivors to break free from the chains of abuse and to embrace a future filled with hope and possibility. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders, the volunteers, and the countless survivors who had found strength in the foundation's embrace knew that their work was far from over, but they were undaunted by the challenges that lay ahead. They were a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light to guide us forward. In the wake of the harrowing Watts family murders, a community shattered by the heinous acts of Christopher Lee Watts, a group of survivors and advocates emerged, determined to forge a new path forward. They had witnessed the devastating impact of domestic violence firsthand, and were driven by a relentless passion to prevent such tragedies from happening again. They launched a mobile app that provided resources and support to survivors on the go, ensuring that help was just a tap away. The app offered a wealth of information, from shelters and counseling services to legal assistance and financial aid, all designed to empower survivors and help them navigate the complex challenges they faced. Recognizing the need for a more personal touch, they even started a series of retreats for survivors, creating a safe and nurturing environment where they could heal and reconnect with themselves. These retreats were not just about providing a respite from the pain. They were about fostering a sense of community and belonging, where survivors could share their stories, find strength in one another, and begin to rebuild their lives. The founders of the Watts Family Memorial Foundation, fueled by their own experiences and the collective pain of the community, remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. The statistics were staggering. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men in the United States have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. This was a crisis that demanded attention, and the founders were determined to be the voice for those who had been silenced. They worked tirelessly, organizing awareness campaigns, speaking at events, and using their platform to shed light on the warning signs of abuse, the importance of seeking help, and the resources available to those in need. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, which rallied behind them, offering their time, talents, and resources. They had the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, who tirelessly contributed to the Foundation's efforts, from running the retreats to managing the app and handling administrative tasks. And they had the hope that fueled their mission, a hope that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light waiting to be discovered. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. It was a beacon of hope for those who had been affected by abuse, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggles. The foundation worked tirelessly to provide survivors with the tools they needed to rebuild their lives, to educate the public about the realities of domestic violence, and to advocate for policy changes that would make their communities safer. As the foundation grew, so did its reach. They partnered with local and national organizations, sharing their resources and expertise, and working together to create a more comprehensive approach to combating domestic violence. They hosted workshops and seminars, training law enforcement and social workers on how to recognize and respond to cases of abuse, and they worked with schools to implement programs that would teach children about healthy relationships and the warning signs of abuse from an early age. Despite the challenges they faced, the founders never wavered in their commitment. They understood that their work was not just about healing the wounds of the past. It was about creating a future where domestic violence was a thing of the past. They were not just survivors. They were warriors, fighting for the rights and well-being of all those affected by abuse. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a symbol of the power of community, and a beacon of light in the darkness of domestic violence. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a beacon of light in the darkness of domestic violence, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The founders, driven by their personal experiences and the harrowing events that had shattered their family, understood the gravity of the issue and the need for action. They had turned their pain into purpose, creating a network of support that reached far beyond the confines of their own lives. The mobile app they had developed, SafePath, became an essential tool for survivors, providing immediate access to resources, hotlines, and emergency shelters. It was a lifeline in the palms of those who needed it most. The founders were relentless in their pursuit of education and awareness, organizing community workshops and speaking engagements that aimed to dismantle the misconceptions surrounding domestic violence. They shared the chilling details of their own experiences, hoping to inspire others to speak out and seek help. The series of retreats they established were sanctuaries where survivors could find solace, healing, and the courage to rebuild their lives. Each retreat was meticulously planned, offering therapy sessions, mindfulness workshops, and opportunities for survivors to connect with others who had walked the same treacherous path. The foundation's growth was exponential, as more and more people became aware of their mission. Donations poured in from across the globe, and volunteers from all walks of life joined the cause. These volunteers were the backbone of the foundation, dedicating their time and talents to various initiatives, from legal aid to emotional support. The founders were amazed by the outpouring of support, and they were grateful for every person who believed in their vision. Despite the challenges they faced, the founders remained steadfast in their mission. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but they were undeterred. They had seen the faces of those they had helped find freedom, and those memories fueled their determination. They were also aware that they were not alone in their fight. The foundation had garnered the attention of law enforcement agencies, social service organizations, and policymakers, all of whom were committed to eradicating domestic violence. As the foundation expanded its reach, it became apparent that their work was just the beginning. They were part of a larger movement, one that required collaboration and coordination across various sectors. The founders worked tirelessly to build partnerships, hosting conferences and forums that brought together experts, advocates, and survivors to share knowledge and strategies. They also lobbied for legislative changes, pushing for stronger laws and more stringent penalties for those who commit acts of domestic violence. The foundation's success stories were numerous. There were the survivors who had found the strength to leave abusive relationships and rebuild their lives with newfound confidence. There were the children who had learned to heal from the trauma of witnessing violence and had grown up to become leaders in their communities. There were the families who had been torn apart by domestic violence and had found solace and support through the Foundation's programs. Yet, even as the Foundation celebrated these victories, it was mindful of the long road ahead. The statistics were grim, with countless individuals still suffering in silence, afraid to speak out for fear of retaliation. The founders were determined to reach these people, to let them know that they were not alone and that there was hope. They continued to refine their programs, ensuring that they were accessible to all, regardless of age, gender, race, or socioeconomic status. As the foundation grew, so did its influence. It became a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of community and the unwavering commitment to justice. The founders were often invited to speak at prestigious events, and their stories were featured in documentaries and news outlets. They were honored with awards and accolades, but they remained grounded in their mission, never forgetting the reason they had started this journey. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders were relentless in their pursuit of this future, believing that together, they could create a world where no one had to suffer in silence, where everyone had access to the resources and support they needed to heal and thrive. And so, the foundation continued to grow, to inspire, and to make a lasting impact on the lives of countless individuals. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the once peaceful town, the Watts Family Memorial Foundation stood as a beacon of light amidst the darkness. Founded by two resilient survivors, the organization had grown from a seed of hope into a sprawling network of support and advocacy. The founders, both scarred but unyielding, had faced the unimaginable loss of their loved ones to domestic violence, yet they refused to let that tragedy define their lives. Instead, they turned their pain into purpose, launching a mobile app that provided real-time resources and a lifeline for survivors who found themselves in dangerous situations. The app, a testament to their unwavering dedication, offered everything from emergency contacts to counseling services, all accessible with a simple tap on a smartphone screen. But the founders understood that an app was just a tool. It was the personal touch and the human connection that truly made a difference. That's why they initiated a series of retreats, safe havens where survivors could gather, share their stories, and find solace in the company of others who had walked a similar path. These retreats were meticulously planned, ensuring a supportive environment where healing could begin. Each session was led by experienced therapists and counselors, who guided the survivors through the process of acknowledging their trauma, understanding their emotions, and developing coping strategies. The founders were there every step of the way, their presence a constant reminder that they had faced similar challenges and had emerged stronger. As the foundation's reach expanded, so did the founders' influence. They traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, schools, and community events, spreading awareness about the warning signs of abuse and the importance of healthy relationships. They shared their own stories, their voices a powerful tool in the fight against domestic violence. The founders were not just survivors, They were advocates, leaders, and role models for others who had been affected by abuse. The foundation's work did not go unnoticed. Local businesses, community leaders, and even celebrities came forward to offer their support. Donations poured in, and volunteers flocked to help with the foundation's initiatives. The founders were humbled by the outpouring of support, but they also knew that this momentum was crucial to their mission. They had to keep pushing forward, to keep raising awareness, to keep providing resources and support to those in need. As the years passed, the foundation's impact became undeniable. More survivors found the strength to come forward. More communities began to recognize the severity of domestic violence, and more lives were saved. The founders remained steadfast in their mission, their passion undiminished by the challenges they faced. They knew that their journey was far from over, that there were still many lives to touch and many battles to fight. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a movement, a force for change that would not be deterred by the darkness of domestic violence. And as long as there was hope, there would be a foundation to fight for those who needed it most, to remind them that they were not alone, and that there was a future worth fighting for. The founders continued to work tirelessly, their days filled with meetings, planning sessions, and visits to survivors. They were the face of the foundation, the embodiment of its mission, and they were relentless in their pursuit of justice and healing. The foundation's staff grew, and with it, their capacity to help. They began to offer more programs, including legal assistance, job training, and educational workshops. They even started a scholarship program for survivors who wanted to pursue higher education, giving them the tools they needed to build a better future. The founders were not just leaders. They were mentors, friends, and confidants to many. They had faced their own traumas, and in doing so, they had become living examples of resilience and strength. Their stories were powerful, and they were used to inspire others to take action, to speak up, and to support those who had been affected by domestic violence. The foundation's efforts were not without their critics. Some questioned the founders' approach, suggesting that they were too aggressive or that they were promoting a narrative that might not be applicable to everyone. But the founders remained undeterred, confident in their methods and determined to keep pushing the conversation forward. They knew that change would not come easily, that it would require persistence and a willingness to challenge the status quo. As the foundation continued to grow, so did the number of partnerships and collaborations. They worked with law enforcement agencies to improve protocols for handling domestic violence cases, with schools to educate students about healthy relationships, and with mental health professionals to provide better support for survivors. They even helped to develop new technologies, such as wearable devices that could alert authorities in the event of an emergency. The founders' dedication to their mission was unwavering, and their influence continued to spread. They were invited to speak at international conferences, where they shared their experiences and insights with audiences from around the world. They were recognized with prestigious awards, and their work was featured in documentaries and news articles, bringing the issue of domestic violence to the forefront of public consciousness. Through it all, the founders remained grounded in their commitment to the survivors. They understood that each person's journey was unique, and they were there to support them every step of the way. They listened, they empathized, and they offered hope. They knew that healing was a process, that it took time and patience, and that it was not always linear. But they also knew that it was possible, that with the right support, survivors could overcome their pasts and build brighter futures. As the foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary, the founders looked back on the incredible journey they had undertaken. They had faced countless obstacles, but they had also witnessed incredible progress. They had seen lives transformed, communities strengthened, and a cultural shift in the way domestic violence was viewed and addressed. They were proud of what they had accomplished, but they were also aware that there was still much work to be done. The founders knew that their fight was far from over, that the darkness of domestic violence was still a very real threat to countless lives, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the support of their community, the unwavering commitment of their volunteers, and the hope that fueled their mission. The Watts Family Memorial Foundation had become more than just a foundation. It had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of resilience, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a light to guide the way.